What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the Touchline Talk Show. Thanks so much for joining today. Really good show in store. Christian Pulisic may or may not be on the move. Latest on his future and sort of my thoughts on what should happen, whether this potential loan move is a good idea, the latest going on there, as well as we're going to play another game this week. MLS stress meter. We're going to take a look at the playoff race in both conferences because it's so tight and sort of break down how stressed all of those teams should be with under 10 games for most teams left in the regular season. But before we do all of that, did not get a chance to talk about Liverpool because they played Wednesday or Monday afternoon, and of course the weekend roundup goes out Monday mornings. So didn't get to talk about this game. And of course, Liverpool drew again. And we had a major high-profile moment involving Darwin Nunez. So there's plenty to talk to here, and I wanted to touch on this before we get into some other stuff. First, let's not get this twisted or start spewing false narratives. Liverpool were excellent for most of this game. Not good, not great, excellent. Wilfried Zaha's goal, yes, not good on the defensive side of things, but it came out of absolutely nothing. Nothing. Crystal Palace were just defending. Liverpool were on the attack, on the front foot, dominated possession, created some chances. They had that spurt of energy at the beginning you see so often from them. They just couldn't put the ball in the back of the net. And all of a sudden, Crystal Palace gets one shot. It's Zaha. He finishes really well, takes his chance, and it's 1-0. And so this game we're looking at a 1-0 scoreline, and it should be at least 1-0 the other way. Then you come back, and this is where we get to Darwin Nunez. It certainly looked like Darwin Nunez tried to get himself sent off right before he did get himself sent off by attempting to headbutt Joachim Andersen not once but twice. The first one he didn't really connect on, so he tried it again. He got him this time and got the straight red for it. Of course, this is just stupid in and of itself to go headbutt somebody. Particularly when you're down a goal and you are Liverpool trying to win the Premier League and keep pace with Manchester City after you have already dropped 2 points. There is no excuse. He lost his head. It's that simple. There is no need to dive any deeper than that. And then there's the other part of this, which is not only just in a vacuum, was that a really dumb thing for Darwin Nunez to do and to let himself get wound up like that. But he now is facing a suspension on top of all of the other absences Liverpool already have. If they're fully healthy, maybe Zaha doesn't get that opportunity. But their second and third center backs weren't playing in this game. Their fourth center back wasn't healthy enough to start, so you were at center back number 5 to pair with Virgil van Dijk. Of course, you don't have your midfield intact. The list goes on and on. These injuries are already piling up. And Darwin Nunez decided to excuse himself from the action too. And then there's the additional part of this, which is, well, there are two more things I want to talk about here with the Nunez situation. But the next one is, what is going to happen when Liverpool play Tottenham? If Christian Romero saw that, imagine what he is going to do to Darwin Nunez. Right or wrong, you saw what Christian Romero was doing against Chelsea, what he has done in the past, the track record he's built. If 2 games into your Premier League career, these center backs feel pretty confident, or at least know there's a chance they can wind you up and get you sent off, Darwin Nunez is asking for trouble. You simply have to be smarter. You simply have to be mentally tougher. Yeah, Joachim Andersen instigated it a little bit. I'm sure Nunez didn't appreciate the little shove or whatever it was. But that also came after Nunez, tried to headbutt him the first time. And the other part of this that also can't go ignored. Of course, verbally abusing and threatening anybody is never okay. That part I don't need to dwell on. That's just common sense. But to to take it to this level, again, never okay in any circumstance. But to give Joachim Andersen death threats because Darwin Nunez lost his composure? Aside from all of the other things that make it an awful thing to do, it's just illogical. At least have the decency to take some responsibility if you're a Liverpool fan and take yourself out of the equation for a second and acknowledge that Nunez did something stupid. It happens. It doesn't mean he's a horrible human being. But that, on top of everything else, again, never, never, never okay. It's a real problem in this sport and sports in general that needs to get addressed. But some of these situations it comes up in, I just do some self-reflection, please, before you start blaming a center back who got headbutted. I mean, come on, let's be better, please. Okay, so game's not over here. Liverpool down a man. But Luis Diaz says, I'm just going to basically start acting like two, put the team on his back, scored a brilliant goal, nearly got Liverpool all 3 points. And Zaha also had a really good opportunity. He just came, inches away off the post. And it ends 1-1. Both teams could have had 3 points. Liverpool were, again, fantastic once they went down a man. And props to Jurgen Klopp, despite the fact they were playing 10v11, they went for it. Which is what you have to do when you're playing Manchester City and what you have to do when you're playing Manchester City and you're already 2 points behind. Or not playing, but competing with, I should say. This was my big issue with Jose Mourinho. That team is too good for anybody to settle or celebrate draws and actually hang with them. And Liverpool have been really, really good about this, so I wanted to give them their props this time around too. You have to play for all 3 points every single time you take the field if you want to keep pace with Manchester City. Liverpool nearly found a way to steal this. It didn't happen, so they get the point. Which then goes into, okay, where does Liverpool go from here? And are they already out of the title race? I'm not willing to completely write them off. But the injuries are a major concern. It's clearly having an impact. But the bigger part of this I want to highlight. Because, I mean, if Liverpool run 25 straight wins off, then they've got a chance. And that's not, out of the realm of possibility. But you're in big trouble if you're down 4 points after 2 weeks. Again, though, if you're still within the margin of error with the head-to-head, if Liverpool can if Liverpool can beat Manchester City twice, so all hope is not lost on that front. And Manchester City had stretches last year where they were not overall they weren't their usual selves. They were a little bit off their typical pace. So if you only need 90 points, Liverpool certainly can still get there. But there's another part of this that is getting interesting. And I can't help but think about considering what happened last time Liverpool's injury list looks like this. They are at least 2 points behind not one, but 4 great teams. Right? City, 6 points through 2. Arsenal, 6 points through 2. All in on Arsenal. Spurs, I still firmly believe coming out of Battle of the Bridge 2 that they are a top 3 team in this league until they prove otherwise. It was a bad performance and they still got a point. And what Chelsea did in that first half and overall in the game has to, at least to a certain degree, make me rethink how I feel about them. That is one performance. They still need to get their attackers to actually put the ball in the net. I'm not going to overreact and all of a sudden change my belief that they're the 5th best team in the league. But they played like a team capable of keeping a banged up Liverpool, who just have things go against them, out of the Champions League. This is a much stiffer test in terms of finishing top 4 than Liverpool faced the other time this kind of injury list happened. And, they had that stretch where they couldn't win at Anfield, but they pulled themselves together and got back into the top 4. They don't have the margin of error this time. They are also playing much better than they were that season. So it's this strange dichotomy of I'm not willing to freak out because I believe in Klopp, and quite frankly, they weren't great against Fulham, but once they got going, they were pretty good, and they were brilliant in this game. So we're 2 weeks in. I don't want to hit the panic button and declare them in major danger here. But at the same time, your margin of error is even slimmer this year. Based on, I don't need it, Manchester City is going to be Manchester City. I'm going to back Spurs until they force me not to. I kind of feel the same way about Arsenal, and Chelsea put in an incredibly impressive performance. This was always going to be 5 teams for 4 spots. Liverpool had their work cut out to even get into the top 4. If you ask me today whether they do it, yeah, I still think they do. But all of a sudden, this game against Manchester United has become incredibly important. Because as bad as United have been, guess what? They win, they're ahead of Liverpool. If Liverpool win that game, to me, that'll ease a lot of my uncertainty if they have a comprehensive victory like they should, sort of get themselves back on track. But they got to get 3 points out of that game, or else this is really going to get dicey. Also wanted to quickly mention and give some thoughts on Juventus. Pick up a very convincing win to start their season against a good Sassuolo team. Angel Di Maria comes into Serie A, looks very good, especially early in the game. He was bright. I think he mishit that ball. It was a very, very weird chip that ended up in the back of the net that looked like he didn't do what he intended with it. But it goes in. He opens the scoring. Then Vlahovic comes, draws a penalty, converts a penalty. They were all around good. And the one point I want to make, and the most important thing for me in this game, looking at Juventus and whether Juventus can get back to being what Juventus typically is. It was an unimpressive, stress-free win. They didn't blow you away with what they did on the field. I mean, they were good. They certainly deserved all 3 points. They were dominant. But it wasn't some kind of breathtaking, mind-blowing offensive performance. It was just fundamentally sound and boring. That you have not seen all that much from Juventus in the past couple of seasons. It's been, conceding these uncharacteristic goals, having to dig yourself out of deficits. This is what you think when you think Juventus. Just a comfortable, multi-goal win, not much to it. They're just miles better on the field and just kind of go about their business. So if you're Max Allegri, you've got to be thrilled with that. That is something I am looking for. Just they got to keep that up. But if they start putting these kind of performances consistently, there's a real chance they can get themselves into the Serie A title race. I'm not there yet, but so far so good. 1 week into the season, let's see if they can keep it up. And then we have the other big news that I wanted to discuss again. I don't like doing transfer rumors. I don't like discussing transfers until they actually happen and they're officially announced and the player is there, holding the jersey and all that. But this is Christian Pulisic, number one. And number two, the discussion for me is about the hypothetical. It's not about, or at least as much, considering the situation, it's not as much about sort of where he ends up and what it means. It's, should he make the move, what does this mean for his future? If that makes sense. And so there's a really interesting conversation to have here that to me is much different than, for example, okay, Frankie de Jong. Is Frankie de Jong going to leave Barcelona or not? I don't know. You don't know. There's just not that much to say until it either happens or it doesn't and the transfer window closes. This Pulisic situation is different, so that's why I want to talk about it here. And sometimes you just can't ignore this stuff, and Christian Pulisic is, of course, the biggest name on the U.S. men's national team, so I wasn't about to just wait to see if something happened. So there are all these rumors floating out there about potential loan moves, which is, again, going into this, to me, the most interesting conversation about the hypothetical here. The names that have been floated out, there are plenty of them: AC Milan, Inter Milan, Atletico Madrid, Newcastle, and Manchester United are the five I've heard the most. So my first question here, in terms of the thought process for Christian Pulisic and what this all means, is this a loan move specifically for the World Cup? If there wasn't a World Cup taking place in just over 3 months now, is Christian Pulisic pushing for this loan move the way he reportedly is? Or does he actually feel, outside of the World Cup, that it's time to move on from Chelsea? Because those are two different things for me, and they change how I feel about this. But the world we're living in is a world where Qatar is 13, 14, less than 15 weeks away, if I did my math right. Something in there. And so, absolutely, you do whatever you have to do to get yourself playing time before that tournament. 100%. So now you're looking at these potential options. And it seems as if his preference is Manchester United based on the reporting I've seen. Which, if it's a loan move, I'm fine with. Again, get on the field. That team clearly needs help in attack. And from the Chelsea side of this, it really does seem that Thomas Tuchel has lost his faith in him. I don't see him getting into that starting lineup anytime soon. Kai Havertz seems to be locked in there. Raheem Sterling is not going to be taken out of the starting lineup anytime soon. And Mason Mount was arguably their best player last season. He's not going anywhere either. So all of a sudden, you don't have a spot for Pulisic. That was part of the thought process this summer before Raheem Sterling came in was, well, if you move Lukaku, all of a sudden, maybe there's some more playing time. And Tuchel said, I want Raheem Sterling instead. So, 100% on board with the loan move to get playing time before the World Cup, even if that's Manchester United. And now there's the second part of this, which is, assuming a loan move happens, what does this mean for Christian Pulisic's future? Because he's going to be in the exact same position Romelu Lukaku is going to be in. He's still a Chelsea player. And if Pulisic has decided, My future is elsewhere. I don't see a future for myself here. To me, that's what you got to get that sorted now, instead of pushing it a year down the road when who knows what the situation's going to look like. Who knows how this loan move is going to go. And also, it changes the conversation about the team he's joining. If this is it, which goes back to the original question I had about where does he see himself in terms of long term with Chelsea? Because if you're moving for a season, wherever you want to go, whoever's going to get you the most playing time, whoever makes you the best offer, by all means. But there is the other part of this, that if Pulisic's mind is made up that this is a loan move to trigger a permanent move, my thoughts change pretty drastically. If I am Greg Berhalter, if I am Christian Pulisic, if I am a U.S. men's national team fan, I want no part of Christian Pulisic at Manchester United permanently. None whatsoever. United has the worst of both worlds. Of course, there is the blatant dysfunction and no Champions League. You're not looking anywhere close to getting back to the Champions League. I don't want players in that environment. And there is also the reality, which is part of Christian Pulisic's problem at Chelsea, which is the top clubs in the biggest clubs in the world, I should say, because Manchester United falls into this category, are going to continually spend money on top of you to continue to improve that position. Right? Look at what Chelsea just did. Chelsea splashed all that money on Ben Chilwell. And then paid all that money for Marc Cucurella with Ben Chilwell still there. And, by the way, playing well when he's been healthy. Of course, he missed a large portion of last season. To go improve the left wing-back spot, which, of course, is becoming much more valuable in today's game, and especially the way Tuchel sets his team up. But you get my point. This idea that somehow Christian Pulisic is going to be able to work his way into a starting lineup and then stay there at one of these clubs, to me, has always been nonsensical. It's not how this works. There are going to be times where, because of an injury, he gets in there, because he has a really good stretch of training, he gets in there, he has a good run of form, so all of a sudden he gets one game and he scores and plays well, so then Tuchel keeps him in 3, 4, 5 games, which is exactly what you've seen in his Chelsea career. And then there are going to be stretches where he falls out of favor, or everybody's healthy, so he gets bumped down the depth chart, and he's going to be stuck on the bench for a while. I don't see that changing if he goes to Manchester United on a permanent basis. Now, this season, considering the squad and everything going down, he's probably going to get the playing time he needs, which is, again, why I'm fine with United on a loan. But I see him running into the same issue long-term. United, Inter, AC Milan. Inter in particular, I'd be very curious to see how he fits into that system. Which leaves the two other options I haven't discussed yet, in terms of looking at this as a potential long-term solution for his future. 1, Atletico Madrid, and 2, Newcastle. In many ways, to me, Atletico is a perfect club. Right? Consistently in Champions League, you're playing at a really high level with really good teammates. You're competing for a La Liga title. It's sort of that half step down from Barcelona, Real Madrid, your top 4-ish teams in the Premier League, you know, your top couple teams in Serie A, PSG, etc. It's that half step down from where Pulisic is right now. My concern would be when push comes to shove and you're in the Champions League, Diego Simeone goes back to what Diego Simeone always does, and that does not suit Christian Pulisic's skill set. Now, to be fair, the past couple seasons, on a game-to-game basis in La Liga, Atleti have really opened themselves up and started playing a much more appealing, much more attack-minded brand of football in terms of producing results. I mean, João Felix had 3 assists in their opening La Liga game. There has been some sacrifice made on the defensive standpoint to be a little bit better offensively these past couple seasons. So to me, that could work. I would just be hesitant because Simeone is never going to be ashamed of parking the bus when the bus needs to be parked. The other team here that's been heavily linked is Newcastle. If this is a long-term, if Pulisic is viewing this as a long-term solution, this is the one I have the fewest questions about. That Newcastle team is A, already good, B, going to get better, C, going to be well-financed. I'm a huge Eddie Howe fan who is going to let Pulisic do the things that Pulisic does best and let him thrive. And I'm also not convinced they're going to get to a point where they are consistently spending to replace him the way Chelsea is, and Chelsea has. I very much see a world in a season or two even, maybe a little bit longer, where Newcastle fit that athletic sort of half step below, right? Their team 6-7 in the Premier League, pushing for top 4, maybe get in sometimes, maybe don't. But there's sort of that gap between the very, very best teams and the teams that are happy to make the Europa League. That's Christian Pulisic's sweet spot, in my mind. I can definitely now he gets into that starting lineup consistently. And moving forward, I could see him holding a spot in that starting lineup consistently. Because to me, that is ultimately what this comes down to. If Pulisic wants to make sure he has the playing time for the World Cup and then come back and fight for his spot at Chelsea and know he's going to be playing in or contending for a Champions League, more power to him. I just don't see it going much differently than it is now. He could get more playing time than he has these first couple games, but I don't ever see him becoming a regular starter over an entire season where he's starting 30 Premier League games for Chelsea. I just don't. So that has to be part of this thought process here too. Because it's not just about the World Cup. That is, I'm sure, in his head, priority number 1 right now. And you take the loan to make sure you're sharp for that. But at the same time, you also got to be thinking about the next step. Because if you're going to get this loan done, that also means to me you got to sort of have an idea of what your next step is going to be. And of course, it takes 2 to tango, and maybe wherever he ends up, for whatever reason, doesn't want to sign him permanently. So you're just auditioning basically for somebody else to come get you. And so maybe this ends up being 2 completely separate things where one, he is actually making the decision about his future next summer. But I think there's a good chance Christian Pulisic has basically decided my future is not with Chelsea, which means all this has to be part of this thought process if he is going to make this loan move. So we'll see if it ends up happening. But to me, that's the interesting part of all of this, is kind of what it means moving forward, because there are so many variables here, and he is obviously such a big deal in this country, and this is has the chance to shape the prime of his career, right? If he's not getting the time at Chelsea and he wants to move, that process, it seems, is going to start with a loan. The question then becomes, are we just going to be back in the same place in 12 months where Tuchel doesn't really want him and he wants more playing time? Or is there going to be an understanding moving into this loan, this is probably the end of the road? Is that what Christian Pulisic wants? There's a lot going on here, but that is where I am on all of it.